As we're all aware, Postal Service has been struggling with some serious, long-standing financial challenges for a while. And one of my top goals since I joined this committee 400 years ago, no, 15 years ago, has been to address these challenges and to help Postal Service find a way to thrive in the 21st century. The Postal Service operates, as we know, as the center of a $1.4 trillion mailing industry that employs, I'm told, about 7.5 million people across our country. This industry provides 6% of our nation's jobs, 6%. And that puts it on par when it comes to total jobs and revenues with the airline industry, and I'm told the gas industry, oil and gas industry as well. And businesses, both large and small, depend on the Postal Service's one-of-a-kind retail processing and delivery network, 200-year-old legacy delivery network. But as we sit here today, there are some real questions that continue to be asked about the future, what the future holds for the Postal Service. Despite having finished 2015 with an operating profit, the Postal Service continues to report billions of dollars of losses. On top of that, it's maxed out its $15 billion line of credit with the Treasury. This has left postal management with no other choice but to default on another $5.7 billion health care payment last year, the fourth year in a row that the Postal Service has been unable to fill that statutory obligation. When the Postal Service closed its books on fiscal year 2015, it announced a $5.1 billion loss, its ninth consecutive multi-billion-dollar loss. Complicating matters is the fact that the emergency rate surcharge that went into effect in 2014 to compensate the Postal Service for its losses during the recession is set to expire, I believe, in late March or early April. And by all accounts, the income being generated by this increase is now the only thing keeping the biggest thing, keeping the Postal Service's head above water. When the surcharge expires, rates for the Postal Service's core products will decline, diminishing the Postal Service's revenues and liquidity and erasing the small operating profits it has recently shown. But I think we can still be optimistic about the future of the Postal Service. I am, and I hope you are too. And I say that because despite what the Postal Service has been through, we've seen some significant growth in an important area, and that is package delivery. The Postal Service total volume for this line of business jumped more than 14%. Is that right, General? 14% last year. In addition, this is even more encouraging, at least to me, the steady decline of first-class mail volume since 2006 appears to be leveling off. And by some accounts, we may be starting to see some new demand for this product that's always been the biggest moneymaker for the Postal Service. If that happens, we're off to the races. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. And this past holiday season was much stronger for the Postal Service than anticipated, with mail volumes related to the e-commerce reportedly exceeding expectations. For the Postal Service, though, to truly be successful in the digital age, Congress must enable, we need to be enablers, but we must enable the Postal Service to take full advantage of the opportunities offered by the package boom and other recent successes. And I like to say, as they say at Home Depot, you can do it, we can help. And that's our job to help. Nearly 10 years have passed since major postal reform legislation was last signed into law, although we've made several attempts in recent years without getting the ball into the end zone. It's now for Congress to get off the bench, get into the game, and let's score a touchdown. Absent legislative intervention, the Postal Service will continue twisting in the wind. It will remain unable to fully invest in its future. Its employees and customers will continue to be uncertain about what the future holds for them. And there are a handful of postal reform provisions that we've debated on this committee, as some of us know, for years. Taken together, they would set the Postal Service and its leadership up to turn the agency's finances around further and set it up to succeed in the years to come. The most important of these provisions, we know, is to address the health care costs at the Postal Service, and the fact that this agency is the single largest payer into Medicare, yet does not receive full value from the program for its contributions. I put forward legislation in the last Congress with our former colleague, Dr. Coburn. Many of our colleagues here have supported it. And this year, with Senators Moran, McCaskill, and Blunt, that would allow the Postal Service to do what private businesses do when they coordinate their health care plans with Medicare. This has the potential to largely eliminate the unfunded liability for the retiree health benefits and save the Postal Service some $32 billion over the next 10 years. Our proposal would also give the Postal Service significant savings when it comes to pension costs, which the OPM now determines using inaccurate data that don't account for makeup of the Postal Service's workforce and other important factors. Requiring OPM to use the right data would also reap more than $2.5 billion in savings over the next 5 years alone. We also freed in our legislation the Postal Service to innovate and explore new business opportunities by removing dated restrictions in current law on the type of products and services that they can offer. This part of our bill would let the Postal Service do some specific things like join UPS and FedEx and others in offering and delivering beer, wine, and spirits. It would also encourage the Postal Service to test new innovations, much like its existing authority to initiate Sunday package delivery and to experiment with things like grocery delivery in other parts of the country. Coupled with our proposal to make permanent the emergency rate increase currently set to expire, this part of our bill has the potential to bring in significant revenues in the coming years. Finally, our bill will also push or prod the Postal Service to do what the Postmaster General, the last Postmaster General, often told me was his top goal if we're able to get postal reform done, and that's to put the service back in postal service. Since 2002, the Postal Service has made great strides to be more efficient, cutting total work hours by nearly 30%, yielding $17 billion in savings. We've also seen the number of mail processing centers cut in half from more than 600 to about 300 today. But the solution to the challenges the Postal Service faces today can't be just about more cuts. Cutting costs was certainly necessary. Concern has been raised that further cuts will only degrade service and end up chasing customers away. I share those concerns. We may also be seeing service suffer due to deep cuts that have been made in some areas. In order to thrive in coming years, the Postal Service actually needs to invest in a new generation of delivery vehicles, we know that, and its packaging, its processing plants, and in its post offices themselves. It needs to harness and deploy new technology that can improve service and contain cost rather than continue making cuts that will further erode service. All right, coming to the end. That's why our bill, a bipartisan bill, would pause further service standard changes for 5 years and mail processing closes for 2 years. This will give the Postal Service and the Postal Regulatory Commission time to explore what the appropriate level of service should be and hopefully return service to the levels that were provided to customers until last year when service standards, I think it was the last Congress, no, last year, when service standards were set at the modified 1, 2, 3 day delivery standard that many of us supported. So in sum, I believe our bill, bipartisan bill, represents the real lasting reform that can help the Postal Service be just as important for my son's generation as it was for my generation, our generation, and for my parents' generation. We've offered legislation that enjoys wide support among the postal stakeholders, whose often widely diverging priorities and goals have made postal reform hard to achieve in recent years. And that's because after months of effort to find common ground, the Postal Service, its unions, and large contingencies of postal customers and stakeholders have finally succeeded in coming to agreement on a number of key provisions that we feel need to be contained in any postal bill for the Postal Service to succeed, truly succeed. These key provisions are contained in our bill. Last thought. Working together, it's important that Congress provide some certainty to both postal employees and customers and to ensure that taxpayers, along with all of our fiscal challenges that we face, are not saddled with shoring up a failing postal service. We can't afford to be here a year from now discussing how we can dig ourselves out of yet another postal crisis. And I don't believe any of us want to do that. I sure don't. We don't want to kick the can down the road one more time. And as it turns out, if we're smart enough and creative enough and bold enough, we don't have to. And we can do what needs to be done to actually fix the problem. So, Mr. Chairman, thanks again for holding this hearing, for everybody attending and providing our testimony, my colleagues to be here. I look forward to working with our colleagues in the weeks ahead to enact postal reform legislation promptly that will enable the Postal Service and its employees to seize the day and provide the services that are needed in the 21st century. I think they really have it right at Home Depot when they say, you can do it, we can help. And the time has come. Let's just do it. Thank you.